Hello, and welcome to the Imperfect Athlete podcast, my show about mistakes, how they happen, what they mean to people, and ultimately how they change behavior to help people improve their performance. This week, I worked with a young athlete, and he came in late to one of the sessions, and he had a big, sad face, and he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, I know I'm wrong. I just missed my alarm, slept through my alarm." I could see in his face that he was truly upset with being late, and he knew that he didn't execute his responsibilities properly. And he said, "I guess I need to buy a new alarm clock." And I think that shows exactly what I mean with changing your behavior based on the mistakes you make. He was very aware that what he did was wrong and probably shouldn't have happened, but at least before he even came to see me, he already knew that he was going to change his behavior for the better. Today, I want to talk about the question, what happens if an athlete wants to be perfect? I have a great guest here today, and we're going to be talking about this question. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I have a great guest today in this episode, Laura Parrott, owner and director of Wheelhouse Mental Performance Consulting. Laura works with a bunch of different athletes, youth and adults, and helps them really understand and ultimately optimize their mental performance. But I think there's no better person to explain what she does than Laura herself. So welcome, Laura. How are you doing? And why don't you tell me something about yourself?
Hi, Yella. Thanks for having me here. So, you nailed it on the head. I work with athletes, and so in teams and individual athletes on their mental performance, stuff like stress, motivation, all kinds of stuff that you probably talk about all the time on your podcast. What else can I say? I'm working on a PhD right now, and while I'm doing my business or like working with clients and athletes and everything. And so my PhD right now is focused mostly on coaching. So women in coaching and identity development and maintenance and that kind of thing. So it's got a really interesting applying my knowledge of mental skills and mental performance to identity development in sport and coaching is super interesting to me. And that's my sport was hockey mainly, but I have a lot of other sport interests. So right now I play beach volleyball and water polo. That's my newest sport. And I'm really loving water polo. It's really hard, but it's really, really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great that you're here. Now, the podcast is about mistakes, which does mean that I always start with asking the sort of tricky question of what is a mistake that you can remember really well, and how do you change your behavior after that particular mistake? It's always a little bit of a low ball to do that right at the start, but that's what this is all about. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I can think of one. So since we're talking mistakes that like really impacted you or like changed you, I can think of one from when I was coaching water skiing. This would have been almost 10 years ago, or 10 years, doesn't matter, about 10 years ago. And so I was working at this water ski school up in Huntsville, and so that's coaching. It's mostly beginners, like resort goers. They go there and they want to learn how to water ski or wakeboard or any kind of water sport like that. So we teach them and we coach them if they already know. But then every little while we do a ski show where the whole resort and like other people in the community come and watch. And it was really exciting because I'd never done ski shows before, and and I got to climb to the top of the pyramid, and that was really fun. I really liked doing that. But then there was this one where I was supposed to water ski during the performance. And that's fine because I can water ski and I can do what needed to be done. But the problem is that the ski that I was to use was this new ski that was far too aggressive for my abilities. Like, or maybe it was maybe just like a little bit too aggressive for me at that time. The problem was, like, when I got up on the ski, I could ski just fine. I had to get used to it still, but I could use it. But getting up on the ski was much different. So the ski had, like, your feet were strapped into these boots super tightly and more close together. Your feet were more close together than I was used to. The, like, shape of the ski was really aggressive, so you always had to be on your edges instead of skiing flat. So getting up on the ski was like way more difficult than what I was used to. So anyway, I was fine with skiing in the show, but not on the ski, and the ski was the only option for me to use. And so my boss was saying, he's like, oh, okay, like, you're gonna ski in the show, and yep, you're gonna use the ski, it's fine. And then I was like, I don't think I can do that. And then I was like immediately really nervous for some reason, like fear and panic set in. And then he just kept saying, like, no, like, you can do it. We'll have you ski for the show. It'll be no problem. And I was thinking, like, what do you mean it'll be no problem? I'm telling you, I can't do this. I can't. And I was like, I can't get up. Like, I'm trying to tell you, I can't get up on this ski. It's not going to work. And then he just, for some reason, wasn't listening. Like, it didn't sink in. I don't know. And I was looking at my ski instructor partner, and we had been going out after work and going water skiing, like, most nights. And he was teaching me how to get up on this new aggressive ski. And he was sitting there equally as afraid, probably less afraid than me, but like really panicked looking, because we're all like part of this show that everyone's going to be watching. And he knows I can't get up on this ski until after like a bunch of tries. And on a ski show, like, you want to just like get up and do your thing. Like, people aren't going to wait for 20 tries before you can get up and then start like doing your stuff. Anyway, so then we're standing there like super afraid and panicked, and my boss wasn't listening, and we're trying to say, like, it's not going to work. Anyway, and then I said, well, let's just give it a test run. And then he was like, okay. And then my ski instructor partner looked super relieved, and we all just like hopped in the boat. I hopped in the water. We showed that I couldn't get up on the ski. and then like we scratched that part of the show. Anyway, so that has stuck with me. It's such a weird situation. Like, you would think like it wouldn't be a problem. You would just say like, no, it's not going to work. But he just wasn't listening. And he was, at that time, I didn't have a lot of experience with like standing up to coaches or standing up to authority figures and just being like, no, like, this, we cannot do this. Like, I'm stepping in here and saying, this is the way it needs to be. Anyway, and it was such a lesson on being heard and knowing like that what you have to say has value, because it was like the alternative would have been everything falls apart, utter humiliation, like your boss is like super disappointed, but it would also be like, I told you so. But anyway, so it was just a big lesson for me in assertion and just being heard. And anyway, so it was, I guess the mistake was not just being secure enough to say like, absolutely not, we're not even talking about it anymore. Like, let's just, like 20, 25 minutes passed of us discussing this, and then we could have been preparing for the show in other ways. So yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I think that's an amazing story, and I really like how the mistake in the end wasn't you going into the show and actually going probably literally flat on your face.
Oh my God.
But
yeah.
the mistake is, it doesn't have to be a big mistake. It's just, it was a small one and you found a way around it in the end. But still, you realized, I can never get myself into a similar situation anymore.
Exactly. Like the stakes of it were so high. I'm just like, I cringe thinking about what would have happened, because there's an announcer who's announcing and be like, and here's Laura coming along, and then I would supposed to be just like pulled up on the ski and going around and waving and like, hi everybody, here I am water skiing, and that would have it'd just be like, oh no, and Laura's having some trouble, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. No, I really like that story, and I think, like you said, it's that you mentioned sort of like, I don't necessarily know why this is a mistake that stuck with me, but it did. And I think those are the mistakes, or maybe it stuck with you because you changed your behavior so much after that.
Yes.
The mistake itself wasn't very big, but what happened after was very big. I really love that story. So let's move on to the topic that I want to talk about today. And I especially wanted to talk about this with you on the podcast because we have already had a lot of good conversations about this, and it's something that we are both very passionate about. Granted, I think that you know a bit more about this than I do, so I'm really excited also for me to learn some new things. And I know that when we talk about people who want to be perfect, I sometimes call myself that a little bit. I want all the little details for instance, when I'm coaching or working with a client. I want everything to be right, and I want to go for the best and stuff like that. So even I sometimes have a tendency to say I'm a perfectionist. But I know deep down that when I say that, I actually I'm not really being truthful, because that's not really what a perfectionist is. And I think that's what I think would be really interesting to talk about today. What is a perfectionist really? So let's just start there. Let's just start with that open question. If I ask you, what is a perfectionist? How would you describe that?
Perfectionism, I would describe it as like a quality or trait. It's not an identity. You are not perfectionism. You are you. A person with lots of qualities, and you can manage all of these qualities, including perfectionism. So anyway, back to what it actually is. It's this focus on doing everything perfectly. As it sounds, perfectionism, doing everything perfectly. But it's this intense focus on other people, pleasing other people, making sure you're completing things for other people. But you have to do everything right. You're hyper focused on this, and it's totally different from being a high achiever. And I know we're going to talk about that a lot today. I'm sure I'm missing a couple things there. Maybe you jump in and I'll add to it.
I think that's really first of all that's really a good explanation. What I would add, I think, is that it's also, it can be a very unhealthy pursuit of goals.
Yes, of course.
It's the need to perfectionistic people need to reach goals, and they're often impossible goals. But what I find really interesting about this, and you mentioned this almost straight away when we were talking about, characters, it's not an identity. So you're saying perfectionism is a character trait. Is that correct?
I would say so. Like, you're a person with perfectionistic tendencies. And I'd say it's more of like a spectrum kind of thing. Like, I have perfectionistic tendencies and I'm working on them all the time. So I'm more managing them. So they don't really affect my life so much. But perfectionism can have a huge impact on your life. And it's highly destructive if you have, if you're not managing it and you don't the first thing, a lot of people don't realize that that's a destructive way to be going about life, and for athletes, it's a destructive way to be going about sport, because a lot of people think like, well, working hard, like that's, and doing the best, isn't that what you want? Like that's what people strive for. That's what they tell you in school. Like you want to work to achieve, you want to develop, you want to move up, you want to whatever. But perfectionism does not get you there. It, striving for only perfect and only, the best score, the top marks, the best daughter, the best girlfriend, the best whatever. It's not healthy and it's not realistic. And perfectionism is, it's all about setting unrealistically high standards and expectations for yourself and also other people, or more so one or the other.
But I find that really interesting, because I know from my background as a coach as well, and I know you're a coach as well, in the environment, I often sort of hear perfect or striving to be perfect as like the ultimate goal. That's when you do that, that's when you've made it. That's when, as an athlete, you're going to be it. But you're almost saying, what I hear is that you're actually saying is like, that might actually be true. It might actually be destructive. So how is it that there's such a weird disparity between the two? Well,
first of all, you bring up a really good point, is that like our society and in all institutions basically they sensationalize and glamorize being perfect or being the best. Like if you are fourth in the Olympics, it's like, who cares about you? Like, like, and even like bronze, people are not like, whoa, bronze medal, or like some people are. I mean, I would be, but I mean, like at the Olympics, it's like gold medal, that is, sorry, I'm like yelling into the.
That's okay.
That people care about that, the best, like they, when you're after a game, they'll ask like, who won? Or they'll ask you like, how did you do? Which means like, where did you place? So everything's about the outcome. Who's in magazines, it's like, who's the hottest? Who has the best style this year? Who's the, it's not like who put in the most effort for this and got halfway through, but still that's great because they, met their personal development goals. Like it's all about being first, and that's what people talk about. And those messages are sent to young athletes and adults and everybody. So it's sort of ingrained in your mind that that's what you need to strive for. And it's not how you're actually going to be number one. Sorry, I strayed there. What was your question?
My question is basically, on one hand, and I completely agree and I understand, is we're saying just always needing to strive for perfection and for, impossible goals and stuff like that is not something we want. We think that that's not good for us. But on the other hand, like as a coach, for instance, I want my athletes to be the best they can be.
Right.
I want them to strive for their highest goal. So I guess my question is a little bit, what is the difference between the two? When does trying to be as good as you can be turn into, now I'm just striving for impossible goals, and if I don't reach them, I lose my sense of self or I lose my confidence? So I guess that's where it becomes tricky for me. It's like, but I push people every day in my work and in coaching. Should I not be doing that?
Right. Yeah, great question, because that I think that's what gets them the trap kind of like into perfectionism. That's what keeps them doing it, because they think like, well, I'm supposed to do this. My coach wants me to do the best I can. But actually the difference between high achievers and people with high levels of perfectionism, like it's unhealthy. So it's the mindset of a high achiever versus the mindset of perfectionism. So meaning and significance placed on winning or losing, succeeding or not, completing or not completing. This is the difference. So you're placing a higher meaning for what it means for you as a person if you win or lose. So if you win as a person, your self-worth, you view that as being like, wow, okay, yes, this is evidence that I'm okay and I'm good and I'm doing what I should be doing.
I'm allowed to be here.
Yeah, I'm allowed to be here. I'm allowed to exist in this space. I'm allowed to lend my voice to this topic. I should be heard. Whereas if you lose, perfectionism would have you feeling utter, disappointment, just feeling, I know there's a D word that's devastated. You're feeling,
there you go.
There we go. You're feeling, utter devastation. And high achievers or striving for excellence involves giving it all you've got, leaving it there, and assuming it was good enough. Okay, you're being secure with the work that you did, and someone else's judgment of it won't change that feeling because I worked hard. I know that I did. And if you got silver, you still know, but I worked hard, and that person, they did beat me, and they did have a better performance today. But perfectionism would have you feeling like you didn't get gold, so you're nothing. They beat you because they are significantly better than you. Or, another part of perfectionism is just totally undervaluing yourself. A high achiever knows their value. They know, even if I lose, I still am worthy of being here. I still deserve good things. I'm still a good person. Whereas perfectionism would have you just, nothing, like an empty shell kind of unless you
success,
win.
You're nothing.
Yeah. So it's a super, super destructive way to view things. And it affects tons of areas of your life. I find it very interesting from a society standpoint, but also like a individual moving through the world, just how destructive it can be.
Yeah. So am I fair to summarize this, and this is obviously very short, as a higher achiever wants to do well and a perfectionist needs to do well?
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. There's more joy in the pursuit as well for a high achiever.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, that's another, you'll see with athletes, especially in our field, you'll notice the difference. They're I don't want to say over, but it keeps coming to mind for some reason. High achiever, you can see that they enjoy their sport. They enjoy the practice. But someone with high perfectionistic tendencies, they are viewing it as the turmoil that has to happen before my fate is decided, before I know where I place and therefore know who I am as a person. If I got fourth, then I know that I'm fourth best. Okay, so I'm a fourth best person. And if I get first, I know I'm the best person.
Yeah.
But if you're a high achiever, that's not how you view it. You're viewing it as cool, I get to go to practice today and I'm going to try this new thing that I've been working on. And I messed up a few times, but that's why I'm going to work on it hard today. Or if your coach is angry with you, you don't view it as because you're terrible, as a person and as a human. People with perfectionism would have you, or people with perfectionistic tendencies would feel I'm straying off there and I forgot where I was saying. I'm sorry.
That's perfectly fine. What I was thinking about while you were saying there, so let's take a situation where one of the listeners walks into a sporting environment and they see a bunch of athletes competing. What are some ways? How can we tell apart people that are high achievers and people that have perfectionistic traits? How can we tell that from the way they compete, or is that something that we would need to know the person more in detail?
I would say, like, depending on the sport, it can be more obvious. Something like, basically at the end of like a track meet or like a track race or swimming, you can see the expressions on their faces, right? So if you can tell what someone looks like when they are utterly devastated, then then that's how you could tell. But there's more subtle ways that you wouldn't be able to distinguish who is a high achiever and who struggles with perfectionism. Like you wouldn't be able to tell during a race that a swimmer has given up halfway through. You wouldn't be able to tell that. But at the end of the race, if someone who had been giving it all they've got and they noticed that they were like 0.001 off of another swimmer and they lost, then you kind of notice that you might notice there. Or like if someone in tennis makes a mistake and doesn't get a shot, you can kind of notice. You can notice spiraling a bit. Like you could be able to see someone who's like doing fine, misses a shot, and then is like totally a big reaction.
It's sort of like he or she breaks.
Yeah, you can see that change in their face, that change in their like confidence. All of a sudden they're doing sort of like nervous things that they don't normally do. And then they just kind of miss shot after that. And it's like it's kind of like a choking scenario, you know, and you can just see after each shot they're reacting, you know. So whereas someone who doesn't struggle with perfectionism, they wouldn't be reacting that way after every missed shot, you know, like they'd just be sort of like refocusing. Like that's more the goal there. So yeah, you can kind of tell in some ways, but mostly, unless you're inside the athlete's head, that's really the only way. But yeah.
Well, I think a lot of us would want to have that opportunity to be inside the head of certain athletes once in a while and cool. Know what they're thinking when they're going through certain situations.
Yeah.
I was just really curious to see if people, after listening to this, could go out into sporting environments and sort of like start testing their ability to pinpoint it out a little bit.
Well, for sure, like I'd say tennis would be a good one to watch. Also golf too. Like I know that there's a really famous choking video in golf that even as I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, oh God.
I think I know which one you're talking about. I know this story.
And I'm like laughing at it, but
it's pretty bad.
I'm only laughing because it's so cringe. Like it's just making me cringe, and I laugh when I cringe. Anyway, this poor guy just like he's taking all these shots, and it goes in the water, it goes in the lake, into the bushes. It's just choke after choke. Okay, now I'm sounding like a big jerk, but anyway, yeah, I was going somewhere with that too, but now I strayed off. Oh wait, okay, I did have a question for you. Volleyball. What?
Yes.
Yeah, like what's you have a big in with volleyball, lots of knowledge there, coaching and playing. I would think that would be a really interesting arena for perfectionism to really take flight.
Yeah, and especially when I combine it with what you're talking about, I can definitely recognize some of this in myself and in a lot of the athletes I coach. I think what makes volleyball a very tricky sport for this is that in order, especially when you get to a certain level, in order to make points, you need to take certain risks. Mm-hmm. And I think where the high achievers really thrive in volleyball is their ability to make a mistake, to go for the risk, miss the shot, and say, oh, well, I missed the shot.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it again. Mm-hmm. And I think where the perfectionistic traits in volleyball really come in is there's almost 50 points in a match. You're going to make some mistakes. Mm-hmm. But when that mistake is like, I've now made a mistake, I'm a terrible volleyball player. Mm-hmm. And I can see that in the faces and the reaction of different athletes. I have athletes that will get blocked, which still in volleyball, I don't agree with it. It's a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's not great as a hitter when you get blocked. Mm-hmm. And they sort of, they literally stand, they look at the block, and they shrug.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, well,
yeah.
Great block.
Yeah.
And then the next point, they just hit it, outside of the block, and they scored a point.
Yeah.
But there's also players that, for them, getting blocked is an insult to their personality. It's an insult to who they are.
Yeah.
And those players then start doing a bunch of other things rather than the shot that they got blocked on once and scored 4 times before they got blocked once, mm-hmm. which if every player on my team does that, I can guarantee that I'm going to win every single set I play.
Yeah.
But just the fact, just that moment of getting blocked hurts them personally, mm-hmm. not just in that play. It doesn't hurt them as in we lost the point. Mm-hmm. It hurts them personally, and it's they feel like maybe their teammates think that they're not good enough or something like that. So when you talk about like the reaction after certain plays, I think mm-hmm. that in terms of blocking, when players get blocked, is where you can really see whether they're high achievers or whether they have perfectionistic traits. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's a great thing. So moving forward a little bit, I think we've been talking a lot about what is perfectionism, mm-hmm. what does it look like, mm-hmm. What's the difference between high achievers and people with perfectionistic traits. What I'm really interested about, you mentioned at the beginning, like there's so many things mm-hmm. about perfectionism. Like, what is it about perfectionism that really interests you?
Oh, yeah, you're right. So many things. Okay, I'd say probably what interests me most about perfectionism is the need to complete at all costs. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, if you're a professional and your boss has given you a task and you agree to complete this task by the end of the week, you'll be completing this task by the end of the week without fail. And if partway through the week you realize that the demands of the task exceed the work time available, you'll sabotage your own well-being and stay too late, miss eating, downtime, exercising. Like, you're going to throw all of that aside to complete it no matter what. And some might think, like, this sounds like normal. If you have a huge deadline and you know how much it means to the company to help out in this way, of course you would have to stay late, work extra hours to get it done. But this is different. So imagine the task given to you is a side task, and that it doesn't contribute to a major deadline, and it will not make a difference to your company's success for the week. Something like alphabetizing thousands of archived client data that hasn't been looked at for 5 years, just in case someone may want to find something more easily in the future. Because you made a commitment to your boss, you prioritize this task over wellness activities, leading to an imbalance between work and life. So this means you sacrifice time with family, like I said. You sacrifice filling your life with joy, exercising, feeling good, cooking good foods, getting outside, playing with your dog, all for what? An unimportant and time-consuming work task? Like, it also means that your other duties are pushed aside, you've got an important deadline coming up, and you're sacrificing work time and mental energy you could be putting towards that project. And not only are your joyful home times being sacrificed, but your duties and chores are pushed aside too. So this either leads to putting the extra work on the others in your family, which may strain the relationships, or you're just not doing them at all, which could easily add to your stress, knowing just how much extra you have to do. And in the end, what happens? Like, you become overstressed, anxious, resentful of your work and your boss, unhappy at work and home, and you've got a buildup of all this other responsibilities you still need to get to and address. And so the need to complete at all costs is a big part of perfectionism and is so destructive.
That's really interesting. And, just, you use the example of a a workplace assignment, but I see the exact same thing with athletes.
Yeah.
Where athletes are unable to stop a drill until they've successfully done the drill. So in a small sort of like circumstance, this can mean I know a lot of athletes that when we're warm up hitting, so just to warm up, they cannot stop warm up hitting on a bad hit. They are unable, literally unable to stop the drill if their last shot, the last hit they had wasn't good.
Right.
Right? So they need to complete.
Yeah.
They need to think the last one was good, so I'm done.
Yeah.
And in a bigger wave, if you have things where, I know athletes that are like, you need to run a certain distance in a certain amount of time, or you need to do a certain action successfully X amount of times in a row, they cannot stop before they've gotten. Even when, when you've run 100 meter sprints, your body is done. No matter whether you reached your target or not.
Yeah, good point.
You're done.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do anymore.
Yeah.
You're not going to go faster, and you're actually not helping yourself at all.
Yeah.
By doing it again.
Yeah.
But I know many athletes that just cannot stop a drill like that until they have reached that one particular goal that they set out to think. And I think that's sort of the athletic representation of what you were just talking about. They're going to go over the limits of their body and their minds just because they have this often arbitrary goal that they set.
Arbitrary.
At some point, I need to hit so many balls into this position. Sure.
Yeah.
It's completely arbitrary, and they cannot stop until they've done it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something for coaches and people who are managers or in any way supervise workers. That is these kinds of behaviors is something to really look out for.
For sure.
When people are so obsessed with finishing a task just for the sole purpose of finishing the tasks and not for the outcome.
Right.
Because if we talk about the sprinter that does 100 meter sprints, his body is going to react exactly the same whether those sprints were in 12.1 seconds or in 12.2 seconds. Like the physical training has been done. But because that person said, I'm going to do it in 12.1, they're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't give them anything anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't help them do anything.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
And it's a great example what you're talking about. It also highlights that perfectionism would have you devalue little accomplishments that you do throughout the day. So like that athlete, they probably had a really good practice, or even if they didn't have a great practice, they still did good things during the practice. But people with perfectionistic tendencies, they won't see that and they won't acknowledge that. So having to leave on a good note, that says to them, they're looking for evidence of okay, now I can go about my day because the last thing I did was evidence that I'm a good volleyball player or I can do this. And instead of being secure enough to know that they put everything into the practice and they had all these other good hits and all these other good passes and plays and whatever, they're focused on this one thing that they've placed a lot of meaning on. And as you said, arbitrarily, why is the last thing you did in practice an example of who you are as a volleyball player? It doesn't make any sense, So they don't value all their little accomplishments in the same way that a high achiever does. Yeah.
So, talking about this, I think I hope that whoever is listening really gets a better understanding and takes a good look at themselves and asks what of my goal tendencies, so what of my behaviors to try and achieve goals is based on a high achiever and what part is based on those perfectionistic traits. And really ask yourself, I am trying to reach my goals, but am I really trying to reach the goals because I want to reach the goals and I want to improve throughout and I want to, enjoy the process and feel very fulfilled when I get there? Or am I just trying to reach the goals because I cannot stand not reaching them? So keeping that in mind, Laura, what are some things that people who have maybe realized, hey, I'm actually trying to reach this goal just because I feel like I need to. That's like part of me is that I can do this or I reach this goal. What are people that have those kinds of insights? What can they do to help themselves deal with these situations and maybe be able to deal with their perfectionistic traits a little bit better?
Yeah, good question. I'd say broadly, a way to describe what to do would be shifting the focus from other people to yourself, and more specifically, shift the focus from letting people down or impressing people or showing that you're a valued member of society. If you are the top earner in your company or the top athlete in your school, then that you've placed meaning on that. So shifting that focus back to you and just doing what's best for you. So that involves like setting boundaries, knowing what conditions you'll be most productive and setting that up for yourself. Looking for those little accomplishments along the way, drawing your attention to what are your strengths. Like, so for swimming, you probably did a few good turns in there. You probably had a smooth dive at some point. So what are the good things that you did? And draw your attention. Start there with those kind of, little things about what you value, or like shifting the focus from the outcome to the process, for one. And then look forward to certain parts of practice and focus on what you can learn. And at the end of practice or at the end of games, think instead of, I placed here or there, think about, okay, what did I learn during this time? Okay, how did I develop? And then really make yourself think about it, because a lot of times perfectionism would have you just answer and be like, nothing. I didn't learn anything. I'm not good. Like,
The easy answer.
Yeah. But really make yourself, because you probably had millions of strengths in there and you probably have tons of little accomplishments, and force yourself to give value to those accomplishments. Okay. And write them down. And just start there, because there's a lot of other things you can do too. But most importantly, start with valuing the stuff that you're doing. And then you can kind of move on to like, okay, what values do I have? Or like, what awesome characteristics do I have? What traits as a person? And then write all of those down and make sure you're recognizing them throughout the day. Other things you can do would be catching yourself. First of all, the most important thing is to recognize when you're having these thoughts and what the thoughts are, how they come about, what triggers these thoughts. And then different kind of cognitive thought related skills you can use. So contradicting these thoughts, for example, like, wow, I'm the worst. I got 4th at the Olympics. What a failure. My hometown was thinking I would get gold. I can't believe it. I let everyone down. So that thought, first of all, think about, okay, what truth is there to that thought? Okay, write down all the things that are true about that thought. And then write down all the things that are not true about that thought, that refute it. And it's a really good exercise, because a lot of the time there is some truth to whatever it is you're thinking. So you're identifying that, and you're kind of, in writing it down, you're saying like, yeah, I see it. I see you. Like, that's true. I did get 4th at the Olympics. That's right. Okay. That is true. And also the people in my hometown did think I was going to get gold. That's also true. Okay. But this person has attached all these other extra meanings to it. Like, wow, I let them down so much. I can't believe I did this. And, all that stuff. So what's the refuting evidence? Okay, these people have supported me my whole life. They know me as a person. They really want me to be happy. I'm actually a great athlete. Like, here's all the hard work I do, blah, blah, blah. So, and like, those are just a few things, but there's so many other skills that can be applied, but start with that stuff.
So you would advise people to also write these things down? So also
for sure.
the things, what you mentioned in the beginning of what you did right, like what your successes were during progress? Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I think in general, I know that I talk a lot about mistakes and what they can do for you, but there's a lot of value as well in just writing down what you did well, and that helps us with the whole process of reflecting on these on situations and becoming the best you can be, which in the end is what hopefully everyone wants to.
For sure.
We are running out of time. I thank you very much for coming on the podcast and talking to me about this amazing topic. I know I'm very passionate about it.
Me.
I know you are probably even more passionate about it than I am. For people listening, I hope you got to understand a little bit what the difference is between a high achiever and somebody with perfectionistic traits. One thing that I want to say before I end this episode is, please don't feel bad if you recognize that you have some of these perfectionistic traits.
Yeah.
Well,
great, yeah.
great minds think alike,
Totally,
right?
Yeah.
We mentioned in the beginning that it's a character trait.
Yeah.
And in some way, character traits are part of you. They shape who you are, what you do, and how you interact with the environment around you. So if you have some kind of perfectionistic trait, that's also part of you, and you can and are allowed to embrace it. What we are trying to convey is that some character traits might not be as effective as you thought they were. And for those character traits, we need to find different ways to deal with them. And in your process of learning how to deal with your perfectionistic traits, make mistakes. Identify when you made a mistake and change your behavior to become better at the end. That's in the end what I keep repeating is, if you are able to allow yourself to make mistakes and then change what you do because of those mistakes and therefore do better the next time, you are always on a path to becoming better at what you do. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. Laura, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
And I will hopefully see everyone in the next episode.